I remember once I said I love you, he said, that's too easy. You love me, it's too easy. Try loving yourself. And so that means, can you accept you with everything that you don't know about yourself? And if we cannot, when I think about it, like what Krishna did for Arjuna, he spoke him to realization. He literally just spoke him to that place. And what Guruji is doing for us is the same.
Actually, one of the things that I've always felt was most amazing about him is how willing he is to commit fully to us on so little evidence. Like, you know, if, let's say from a businessman perspective, I'm going to invest in something. There's the sure bets, you know, like I can put a lot of money into this company. It's probably going to make some kind of result. Then there's those really risky ones where you're like, it might pay off, but this is going to be a hard, long road to get there.
Material success is really important. In the continent of Africa, the hugest problem is that they barely have something to put in their mouth. And if you've been so disadvantaged, like in South Africa, we have 300 years of repression, suppression. So now what's happening is they call it the reawakening of the roots. So people are really seeking their cultural identity. How to decolonize that? What does it look like without the Western influence?
Take good day, Swami Paranthapa.
Take good day, Swami Revatikaanta.
It's very nice to have you on the podcast.
It's nice to be here.
Swami Paranthapa and I, we've known each other, I would say 18 years, maybe.
More or less, yeah.
Something like that. So it's very nice that we finally get to have a sit down.
Imagine.
So I think just for everybody, as usual, I do this with everybody, if we could speak a little bit about your background before you became this version of yourself so that people get to know about you. So how did this all start, Swami Paranthapa?
Okay, so for me, the desire to know God or about God was there since I can remember, and in particular since I was 6. So it metamorphosized into like different interests, and I realized when I was about 9 that he exists, but the thought for me was, why don't I have access? Why can't I feel? Why can't I see? Why can't I? Well, I was not interested so much in seeing, but why can't I feel his presence? And so it became for me trying to figure out how to get into God's presence, how to get into the feeling of God. And this was really like an obsession almost. I was speaking to my sister like a day ago, and she was telling me how difficult it was for her after, because my parents didn't know how to deal with a normal kid because my interests were not any of the interests that my peers had, and really it was focused on like, why can't I? What's wrong with me that I can't feel God's presence? If my body is designed is such that I can sense physical things, I should also be able to sense his presence. So why can't I? And so that took me on a journey. So after I was done with school, it started like a more than 10-year journey trying to figure out how and why. So as a result, I studied every conceivable handheld modality of healing. And so that took me all over South Africa, and it was amazing because I had teachers from all over the world. So I had a really interesting view, and I could see then that my mind plays a really important role in how I feel, what I feel, how I interact with the world. And so it happened that I managed to see many things about myself that stood in the way of what I imagined was what God felt like. And when I was about 25 years old, I started to share that at a center in Johannesburg called Vision Lodge. And that's when I first met Guruji. That's when he came into my life. So I had just started this work, and it was interesting to see what an effect can be had on somebody's body, what you could do if you understood what to do. And so this is how it started for me. So from 6, 9, those are pivotal ages, and then 25.
But did you feel like as you started doing this work with healing, Did that original desire to feel the presence of God was coming in any way?
It didn't.
No.
It didn't deliver. So it gave me the experience of a feeling of being able to affect change. First, it had to be with myself, and then it was possible with others, but it didn't deliver God's presence. It didn't give the feeling.
Somehow to be expected, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that's interesting is that a lot of people almost feel like it's wishful thinking. They want to believe in God. They want to believe that these things are real. For you, it seems like from what you just said that was a given. It was more just, how do I get to the point of feeling?
How do I get there? Yes.
So then Guruji comes in.
Yeah, so he comes in. It was funny. So I walk into the office on this day, and there was a woman house sitting in the center with me. So the owner had gone away on a retreat, and one of her friends was in the office reading this invitation to an event to the secretary. And in the invitation, Guruji's name wasn't mentioned. It was basically the location and a young Mauritian saint. It didn't say what would be happening. There was like no... It was just, you come. And so it was interesting because it was literally down the road, 1 block from where I worked. So I could walk there and I could walk back. And then when I got there, the room was full of people that I knew because there were no devotees. So it was literally just therapists and their clients. So we sat and we waited, and he was 3 hours late. And there were about 800 people to begin with, and it ended up about 600 because 200 people just walked. They couldn't wait, or they didn't want to wait. And then when he eventually came into the room, I remember he was wearing red. I was sitting sort of in the center of the room, and I didn't speak to anybody. I greeted like one person, but I didn't speak to anybody else. And I literally just waited. I opened my eyes and I recognized him. And I recognized that I dreamt about him every day since the invitation, which was 2 weeks before. But I didn't have a reference because there was no picture of him. So now he was there, and I was like, what? And so I just waited. And this darshan was for 3 days. And it was interesting because he did like the old style of darshan, and then he did an embrace. So he embraced every person that was there. So it took really, really long. And then when it was my turn, I felt as if his heart was beating right under his skin as he embraced me. And then I went to sit really close to where I could watch him, where I could observe him. And so what I observed is that his breath suspended 7 minutes at a time. So he would do a 7-minute retention in and a 7-minute retention out. And this was really interesting because I just read about this and what it does. So it meant by watching and by this information that he had complete control of his mind. And that's how he managed to sit there for that long. So I watched him, and then the next day I brought clients, and the next day I brought more clients. And this was the first set of darshans. Then there were 2 more. So he came to the country like three times in total before he spoke to me. So the day he spoke to me was in, he calls it the day we met, was in, it was Shivaratri, and it was in the south of Johannesburg in a temple called Eshwara Koval. And there were 1,000 people because it was Mahashivaratri on the day. So people were coming in and out, and he took the chance to give darshan to everyone. So Lingam's coming out of his body and he's giving darshan at the same time. And so I remember the person that I went with was about 10 people behind me. And so I knelt in front of him. He looked at me and he said my name. And what I had made sure of is that I didn't want to get emails from any. So I never wrote my name down anywhere. I never availed myself to communication in any way. So then I was doing the reductive process of figuring out how could he have known. And my conclusion was that there's no way he could physically know. So, and this is also the day after this was the day that that it happened, it was him, my whole life will be for him. So how it happened was like this. He was giving Vibhuti. I learned a little while later that it was Vibhuti manifested from his feet. So the way he was staying, there was a family of 4, and the younger of the girls was coming into his room to ask him something. And then he had asked her to bring him a tray, like a thali. So she brought it, and he told her to put it down on the floor in front of him. He was sitting on his bed. Then she did, and she was going to leave, and he said, no, stay. So she's the only one who's effectively seen how this happens. And then she describes it like a hole formed in his foot. And then Vibhuti started to pour from the bottom of his feet and from the top. So from both ends of the hole. And it filled the plate. He lifted his feet, so it filled the plate. And then he said to her, now tell your mom to pack it. I will use it for darshan tonight. So he gave this Vibhuti. And so the next day, I was cutting an onion, I remember, in the kitchen. And the smell of the Vibhuti was so strong. The onion was in front of me and the Vibhuti was a little away. It was so strong, it overtook the smell of the onion. And as I was standing, my body became really still. And I heard his voice in my ear. It was in like a really far away, sort of, like in a movie kind of fantasy scene. And he said my name a few times, but not my birth name. It was another name, but I knew it was mine. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I carried on cutting the onion. So the next day I was on the toilet and he was like, I think he was like thinking, geez, what do I have to do to get the message through? And then together with the name, it was a surname. And the clear message that came then was, okay, I need to know who he is and how I can serve him. Those were the words in that order. So I called the woman who was an organizer for him then. And I asked her that question, who is he? I need to know more about him. So like this, the journey started with him. And it's not so easy. He was not interested at all. He was not interested I really pursued, I pushed. And I remember when he did the first Brahmacharya initiations in Stephanshof. So sometime it already passed, and he had asked for a satsang to happen once every 2 weeks. So a venue was found, which is one of the first people that attended, Kalindi. So the darshan was at her house, the satsang was at her house. And in the beginning, there were 3 of us. Just 3. Every 2 weeks we would meet. And like so non-specified and essentially conversation about him. And only one person had communication, which was the woman that was the initial organizer called Hilda Light. And like this, it grew. So every time he came back, a few more people were added to that satsang. And then he initiated Brahmacharis, 2006, I think it was. 2000, the first in Stephanshof. No, 2005.
Yeah,
2005.
That was the first.
End of the year, he initiated. And so there was a devotee from South Africa here, and it became really clear for me that this is the next step for me. And so I was trying to get the comms through him to Guruji. He gave me gates. There was like nothing, no communication at all, no acknowledgement of nothing. Until the next year, like March the next year, just before Shivaratri, February the next year. So I got the message from him, this guy who was here, in December, come to Mauritius in February. And so that's how I became Brahmachari. So no communication, nothing. And then even in the beginning, so for the first 7 years of my relationship with Guruji, it was very hands-off. I think I had 4 days in which there was acknowledgement, communication, where he looked at me and I looked at him, and I remember one interview, the one only interview I've ever had, like official interview I ever had was, so he had dropped the bomb on me. He dropped a bomb. So I went to Mauritius understanding that I will take Brahmacharya at some point, but not when. So I thought it will be time, but I know that this is where I'm going. So we meet each other the first time, and it's literally our first time in each other's proximity. And besides darshan, and I'm sitting in the Shirdi temple at the time, and he comes in, and the automatic move is to give the chair to him. So I sit on the floor, he sits in the chair, and then he looks at me and he asks, "Are you happy to be here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course." It was miraculous that I even managed. And then he looks at me and he doesn't ask. He says to me, "You will become Brahmachari. And the ceremony is next week." So you can imagine the tumult. I was understanding that this is where it's going. I just didn't know it was going to be next week. And so all kinds of things happened. So that cooking that he's talking about now in Guru, it was full on cooking.
But just interrupt. What I like to hear is when you say, okay, the first 7 years, very little interaction.
7 years.
Because people imagine things sometimes, and I think it's been for me, it was the first 3 years. There was like some contact here and there, but it was not what people see now.
No.
And I think people assume, oh, these guys,
no,
they've
they
been
were
with
always
him since
there.
day one.
No.
No, there's a
It's
whole
not
process.
like this. There's a whole process.
Yeah.
And it's a process of elimination, really. Eliminating our expectations, our desire, and like showing us that this is not about you or how you want things to go. If it is anything, it's to show you that it's about him. And it's about the place that he gives you. Anyway, so then I remember this particular incident. So in the time, I was really pushy, and I was trying to get myself into spaces where he is, and he's really not interested. He's not. It's like, for what? And it started on the beach. So he was in the ocean swimming, and he had been swimming for some time. And so he comes out of the water, like 2.5 hours he was in the water. He comes out, and I was on the beach watching. There were like 8 or 9 of them in the water, and Matajis were in a separate place. So now he wants to go to where they are. And like automatically I follow behind him, and I'm walking behind him, and the wind is blowing at the front of him. So I'm behind, and the fragrance coming from his body was incredible. So I'm thinking in my mind, but the ozone in ocean water cancels fragrance. But like, why is he fragrant? So then I was checking, I was checking in my mind, because I was watching everybody's clothes. Was there a bottle of perfume in his clothes? And there was nothing. So it gets to the place where he stops and we coincide. So I said to him, "What perfume are you wearing?" And he says to me, "I'm not wearing perfume." And I was like, I rolled my eyes. I remember I rolled my eyes. And then he said, no. From my elbow to my hand on my upper body, and from my knee to my foot on my lower body, both feet and both, this fragrance comes. And then I again, it's like I did an inside eye roll. And then he says, "You don't believe me? You can scratch and sniff." So I scratched, and the fragrance became more and more. And then the weirdest thing happened. I looked at him, and I said to him, "I love you, and I surrender myself completely to you." And he was like, "What?" And then
I smell good?
And then he says, it was so out of context.
Right.
And then he says, "Will you say that in front of a witness?" And so then the same guy who was here and took Brahmacharya, and so he was nearby, so he called him. And then he said, "Say it again." And now I was irritated, because wasn't it enough that I said it to you? Wasn't it enough that I said it to you? And so then I said it again. And then he looked at me and he said, "We'll see." And that's essentially when he opened Pandora's box.
Sounds like the same Guruji I know.
Yeah. And
We'll
he just
see.
like really pushed against, because for me, his validation was the most important thing. And that looked like for me, contact, conversation, words. It looked like that for me.
When I hear something like that, for me, like, and I want to hear what you think. The reason, because I think people need to understand the context of why he would say something like that, why he would say to somebody like, let's see. Because I think even if it's well intended, we don't know the depth of what these words mean.
No.
Even if in the moment it's a sincere thing, we don't know what we're surrendering. We don't know what it means. We don't know the depths of our own being and all the different resistances and samskaras that will
That are
still
going to come up. Yeah.
That's it. And I think just for context, I think that's what
Yeah.
it really comes across in these interactions.
And I mean, I was 25. What do I know about surrendering what? And so, but it was like I was prompted to say this. And then now I'm there. And I don't mean prompted by him. I mean,
Right.
my
Internally
whole
prompted.
inside
Right.
prompted me. So then it came out, and then I said it to him. And then, so that was the end of the 4 good days. And we were in Mauritius for 6 weeks. So you can imagine. The rest of the time was literally just pushing against. He was just pushing against me. And I remember this, I can see it like a scene he was wearing pink. And we were walking in the passage, that to the kitchen in Katamon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we were walking in the passage, and I passed him because it's a small space, and I accidentally brushed against him. And he took the chance and he said to me, "Don't touch me." It broke me. It was like, I was broken. And so I was computing and like trying to make sense and it was incredible that for less in different circumstances, I would have just like, this is not what I want to experience, and out. But the feeling to do that never came. And then so many feelings were coming and so much judgment was coming. And I really wanted to speak to him about it because I understood from my own work that this is something that needs to be spoken. He never gave the platform for a conversation. So I was, and then I couldn't say it to anybody because I didn't know anybody else. And I mean, it's not anybody's concern.
Right.
What's happening it's my thing and I need to be able to process this. And then so I asked him if I can speak to him. He said, maybe later, maybe tomorrow, maybe. And maybe it didn't happen. And then on Thursdays at the time, he would give interviews in the day and darshan in the evening. And so this is the day that he chooses. So in my mind, it's like he has already done so much. Why should he do anything more? And why should he, like, who am I? So I'm standing, and he used to give darshan interviews in the chapel. So I was standing, and I remember it started raining, and there was somebody next to me, and he looked in a really ferocious way at me, and he said, "You, come here." So he goes into and it didn't matter, when interviews were being done, the door was never closed. And he closed the door behind him, and I was like, my God, what's going to happen? I'm like, done. So he sits down and he's asking, and I sit on the floor in front of him, and I had some questions. And so he changes completely. He smiles. He ticks all the boxes that were important for me. And so he looks at me and he puts his foot on my chest. And he answers all the questions that I had. And in particular, I can remember the answer to 3 of them. So the first question that I had is, like, how do I know you? It feels like I know you forever. Do I know you from before? And so he answers the question like this. He says to me, how many times this foot has been on this chest? And then, so without me needing to say anything. And then the second thing that was in my mind is like, I could see that this is a big thing, that this is going to become something significant. And I asked in my mind, the next thing that I wanted to ask was, so he says, oh, I see you want to know what your role is. And then he said to me, you are the builder of temples. And I freaked in my mind. I was like seeing a construction site and cranes and building materials. And he burst out laughing because he could see. So he set, again, it was a setup. He set me up. And so then I could see that he saw everything in my mind, that there was nothing that he was not seeing. And so it got worse and worse, and it felt literally like a volcano of negativity was exploding inside of me. And for a lot of the time, it was directed at him, and I had no control over it. Like I was watching my mind shooting at him without having any control over what was coming out. And so the only relief would be literally sleep. And because, I mean, naturally as people, I don't think that we want to feel the hatred or judgment, or I don't think that we want to feel those things. But I think when he said we'll see, it was so much about me seeing everything that's inside of me that I thought I'd worked this as much as possible. But he was showing me that your work was minimal. And then I could see, and now I can see the service that he's rendering. That he's rendering the service of showing us that these are the things that are inside of you. And so Shivratri comes, and this is like the defining moment. And now I'm feeling really sorry for myself because no consolation is coming from him. He's not giving. At least not in the way that I imagine he should. So I'm sitting at the back of the tent and I'm watching it's like my mind is on fire. It's shooting all kinds of judgments. I'm watching the scene. I'm watching my mind. And I'm thinking, like, what's wrong? Like, what's wrong with me that this thing is going on inside of me? And then, but by now I had a fever. My body ached. And it's impossible. It's impossible to get him in the same room. It's impossible to speak to him. It's impossible, everything. We do everything together, but there's no possibility to meet. Yes. So then he manifests Hiranyagarbhalingam. And this was like my worst moment. It's like whatever was inside now became fully animated, fully came out. And in my mind, the words came, I will not bow. I will not submit. And so I watched. So he came before he manifested Hiranyagarbhalingam. He was walking in the tent. So he walked and he was speaking to the sun spirit, but he was coming to me, to where I was sitting. And he looked at me. And so already he showed me a few days before, he knows what's in my mind. So now I'm sitting and I'm in pain. And I'm in pain mentally, I'm in pain physically, and he comes and he stands near to me and he looks down at me and he's shining. And he looks down at me and he says to me, are you awake? And in my mind, this was so automatic in my mind. What my mind said, I will not repeat. But and then he just looked at me and he smiled, and because he received my internal and my external, and I said, yeah, I'm awake. And then he walked away, and then I saw some change in his, like he physically changed. He left, he came back and his clothes had changed. And he had made Hiranyagarbhalingam. I said, I will not bow. 20 minutes later, I was on my hands and knees. And then I went to bed, and the next morning I got up and I was looking for the onslaught, and it was completely gone. So this is like what he does for us. He creates the circumstance that we can literally offload, that he can take whatever is not serving us anymore. So the qualities that, like he said yesterday in the Guru Gita, that he time travels with us. And he goes to the place where the most change needs to happen so that the future can change. And I think those 7 years were defining in that way, because he used the time to change everything that was happening in here. And the objective and the function and the purpose he gave everything. He gave everything. And it's like, if I think about it, that there was nothing that I could give back. I couldn't give anything back. And even now it feels like a debt, like a debt that I don't think any of us will be able to repay. Because the work is not done until it's done. And he's continuously working to mold us into who we can be. So, yeah, this is
the thought that comes, while you're sharing this. A lot of people talk about Satgurus. What is a Satguru? What is his job? What is his function? I think not enough people talk about Satshishya. What is a real devotee supposed to be like? What is a real disciple? What does he have to go through to become a true disciple? And I think, people they're afraid of going to therapy, for example, because of what will be exposed. And it's like, well, try dealing with this. This is someone who is not speculating as to what you're going through, is not speculating as to how to fix what you're going through. No. It's somebody who has, 20/20 vision of what you are now, why you are in this position, the entire causal chain. And as you said, in a sense, time travels with you to say, let's go and fix this. But he's quite patient in the sense
Extremely.
That you must figure this out. I can guide, I can push it, but you must figure this out. And as you're describing, and as I can see and feel, it's not something trivial in the slightest, and it's quite a difficult process at times, but at the same time, so much what I'm hearing is there's a lot of gratitude also, appreciation, because how else can we do this? So
we can't do it alone. It's not possible. And if I think of the why, like why even? I mean, I'm nothing to him. Where do I come from? Where do you come from? Where do any of us come from? And why should he risk? Who are we that he should risk? And he does. Every day he chooses to risk. He chooses to take. Sorry.
No, of course it's fine. Let me maybe fill in the gap a little bit here. What I think is again, I'm always concerned people, like, what does risk mean for them? I'll tell you what I feel when you say something like that. He has borderline nothing to gain from this, but factually what can happen is he comes and he presses these buttons we don't want pressed. He shows us what we don't want to see. He lifts the carpet on our lives.
He pulls the carpet out from us.
This is also true. And then the thing is that we will blame him for it. We will say, why did you do that? It doesn't feel nice.
Yeah.
I'm seeing things I don't want to see. I'm feeling things I don't want to feel. Because we don't understand our essential human nature is to only desire to see things which bring pleasure to our senses.
Yes.
I want to think pleasurable thoughts, see pleasurable things,
and
touch.
Feel pleasurable sensations.
Smell pleasurable things, touch pleasurable things, etc., etc.
We are obsessed with this.
Of course. It is our entire human pursuit.
Yes.
And then he says, all well and good, but I want you to see the best thing, not good things. I want you to touch the greatest thing. I want you to smell the greatest thing.
Be the best you can be.
Etc.
Yeah.
And in order to get there, we're going to have to lift that carpet and dig deep. And as you said, he has a lot to lose in the sense that how many times he is blamed for that. Yeah. It's the doctor that's amputating your leg for your good.
For your own
shouting
life.
At him saying,
don't do it.
Beep, doctor.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And it's incredible. It's like the the vastness of his, and the intimate knowledge that he has of each of us. I mean, it just in small interactions, you can see it. You can see how he approaches, how he would ask the question. He already knows the answer, but he asks it to see if you know and can you sit with this? Are you okay with you? And are you I remember once I said, I love you. He said, that's too easy. You love me, it's too easy. Try loving yourself. And so that means, can you accept you with everything that you don't know about yourself? And if we cannot, until we know what there is inside of us, we cannot. And when he shows, only then you can begin to see, you can begin to feel, you can begin to, it's a totally different internal dimension. So then that driving desire for me was feel God's presence, and why I cannot. I remember he was leaving and he wouldn't say, okay, now you have arrived at the destination, and now it's not his style. It's not the way that he does things. And if I see it, he mapped out so many experiences for me over so many years. And I remember it was like I was at breaking point, like literally against the wall. I was against the wall. And then he said these words to me, I have no use for your mind. I have no use for your mind. And he said it again and again. And I remember we were in South Africa, and I held his hand, and I said to him, I understand that you have no use for him, but I don't have another way to be. And I said to him, please don't abandon me. And again, from where? From where such a feeling, and for why? And so then he just looked at me, and he made sure that I understood that this is the long game. That this is not a year or 2 years and for me it was already clear. I'm not, like in the beginning, I want to understand. I want to understand myself. I tried to understand him. It aborted after 2 years.
Very frustrating endeavor.
It's like, because you try using whatever your memories are, whatever your expectations are, to put him in a box, and you can't. And so then it progressed, and he gave me several experiences with different beings. I remember in 2008, I met Hanuman for the first time, and then 4 times, in total 4 times, and each time a different lesson, and essentially all to do with judgment. And then also to do with pride, because when I met him, had arrived. I understood what it is that I had to do here. I was doing it. Results were coming. And then to see that I know nothing, that this is not even the tip of the iceberg. It's the tip of the iceberg. And that human beings are much more complex than that. And until we are willing to stand with them, and until we are willing to stand even with ourselves, we have no right. We have no right. And so then he says to me, so I become Brahmacharya. And now, remember, my whole life was with my hands and touching people. He says to me, so we have my second every interview. So he says to me, you're not allowed to touch anyone anymore. So in my mind it goes, but what does that mean now? It means that I'm not able to feed myself. And so he's essentially saying, I'm responsible for you, like when I think about it back. And how I've totally separated myself from any system that would support me. So I didn't take, so from the time I left home when I was about 18, 19, I didn't take anything from my parents. Till date, I didn't take anything from my parents.
Independent.
And so I was independent, and I knew how to do what has to be. I'm a hustler. I knew what I had to do. So I started healing. I did whatever it is that needed to be done. I learned what I needed to learn. And so I was independent. I was my own person. I was living on my own terms. And then he makes it clear, you don't touch anyone. So it means essentially no money is coming into my life. So I left Johannesburg and I went back to Kokstad, and then he does what he does. And so I had a need. I had some bills to pay. And I had made an altar for him in my bedroom. And so I sat in front of the altar and I said, this is my need. And I cannot do what I do to sustain myself. So I don't know what's going to happen. And I leave the room. And a few minutes later, like literally 15 minutes later, I see a friend of mine running down the road, and she comes into the yard. She knocks the door. I open. She comes in, and she says, please tell your people to leave me alone. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so she takes out of her pocket the exact amount of money that was required, and she gives it to me, and she leaves. And in my mind, I think, I should have asked for more.
But what were the people that were not leaving her alone? What was this about?
No, because there was a voice telling her, you take this much money and you give it to and you give it to.
Yeah, should have asked for more. Is a good point.
Yeah, but he was proving his point. He was proving that I'm the one who takes care of you. And then, like on a random other day, he said to me, I was laying on the floor in his bedroom in South Africa. And he looked down at me and it was not in my mind at all. And he looked down at me and he says, oh, you still worry about that? And then I was like, what? And he looked at me and he said, you should never worry about money. I know how to take care of my own. And since then, whatever it is that he wants to be in my life or to not be in my life, in the way that he proves again and again, I'm the one taking care of you, of all of your needs. And not just my outside needs, also my inside needs. Like if there's something that I really need to, he doesn't hesitate to make a correction. Whether it is for me now, for me then, for me, he gives always the context and does more than I can do in service to him. So the flawless service I can experience is coming from him. And then he answered like this. So it was 7, 8, 10 years, 20 years after my experience at 6, we met. 4 years after that, I take the Brahmacharya initiation. So he says to me, in the instructions, so he gives various instructions. You don't do this, you do that, and knowing that it's not going to be easy, but it was never in my mind like that this is not doable, that I can't do this. Because the motivating factor for me was that I understood that I loved him and that I cannot imagine my life without him inside of it. And then he was having breakfast before leaving for Latvia. So this is about, so I had already taken, so there was 3 years between Brahmacharya and taking this Geru, this orange color.
2008, yeah.
Yeah, he gave. And so he's having breakfast before leaving for Latvia a year after this. Yeah, about a year after this. And he ignores me completely. And by now what had happened is he had said to me, so I was against the wall, 7 years, and the last of the 7 years was really difficult. And then he was leaving to come back to Germany. Sorry, I'm crossing timelines.
Good.
So he was coming back to Germany, leaving Mauritius. And he's about, my Brahmacharya name was Mangalananda. So he's getting into the car to leave and he stops. So, and he leans forward to me and he looks with so much love in his eyes. And he says to me, soon, my Mangalananda, soon. And so what I'd been used to over that period of time, so the 3 years of Brahmacharya, and then the 4 years into being a Swami, with the 7 years of hell for my mind. And so at the end of this, what he did is he gave me the feeling of friendship sort of in between, but still with a lot of correction. So now he was using proximity to make corrections. Before it was exclusion to make corrections or to let me understand or feel or stuff. And then so it was here, it was the year that we moved to Sri Pithanilaya, which is 2010, I think.
Late 2009. Yeah.
So this is 2010, and we're here, and he's traveling. He's going to Latvia, and he's having breakfast, and he had called for me, and I'm sitting, and he's there, and he's eating, and he's not looking at me at all. He's not talking to me. There's nothing. And I'm like, okay, so I should just leave the room. So I leave the room because there's nothing. And then he calls back for me. So I come back and I sit, and it's the same. And then he gets up and he leaves. He leaves to go to the airport. And the feeling inside of me, I'd never felt that kind of feeling before. It felt like something was missing, was taken like away from me. And it felt really, really strange and painful. And then I called him. I messaged him, and I was telling him how I feel. And he said back to me, "You who are dear to me should never doubt who I am." And together with this, what happened is the feeling, I can only describe it as what I was looking for my whole life, appeared. It appeared inside of me, and it has never left. So it doesn't matter what's going on outside, doesn't matter because stuff is going to happen. And then I check. In the beginning, I would check, is it still there? Can I still feel that presence? And so till date, all that I need to do is to bring my attention to it, and it's there. That presence is there. So the work that the Sadhguru is doing is not for himself. He's not working for me, because how do you pay for that? Like, how are you going to? He gives function, he gives purpose, he gives everything to us. And like, what are we going to give back?
I think also every new person that he accepts to do this for is just adding burden in a sense, because everybody has their unique challenges and difficulties. But of course, everybody also gives him love and gives him all of this. But it's like, for someone who is fully in that space all the time anyway, it's not that it's meaningless. I will never say that. But for a long time, it's going to be a lot of just unpleasant, hard work
on his part.
Yeah, for a possibility of love down the road.
Maybe.
Exactly.
Maybe if we survive the process.
Actually, one of the things that I've always felt was most amazing about him is how willing he is to commit fully to us on so little evidence of
our deservability, that we even deserve it.
And of a good outcome. Like, if I take let's say from a businessman perspective, I'm going to invest in something. There's the sure bets, like I can put a lot of money into this company. It's probably going to make some kind of result. And then there's those really risky ones where you're like, it might pay off, but this is going to be a hard, long road to get there. And it might also not pay off. And it's like, I sometimes think, imagine if the other people in my life, my parents, friends, whoever it may be, would have the insight into me that he has about my thoughts, my emotions.
They would never.
The relationships would be over the same day.
Same day. They would never make the investment. Never.
And why would you? Like, why would you invest your life, like, to really hold the hand
of
someone that thinks things about you that are sometimes horrible, that, you know...
And you know what they're thinking.
Yeah. And I think it's I know people will respond by saying, but it's just human nature to think and feel these things. And it's like, does it excuse it? Does it make it nice? Does it make it, acceptable? Imagine husband and wife. And
if
then
you knew,
the wife finds out that the husband is thinking about other women daily.
Yeah.
And yet professes something else by lip service and so many things like this. And then to say, not only am I going to stay in this, I'm going to double down and I'm going to commit fully and I'm going to show the same love without diminishing, unconditionally. And you can think of 50 more women and it won't change a thing. And, it's just, I think sometimes perspective needs to be established for people to understand just how crazy a relationship with a true guru really is. It segues, I think, a little bit for me into this. I mean, everything you've been sharing so far, is it fair to say that parts of it is here?
Parts of it are there.
Other has been exclusive.
Yeah.
Nice. So this, for those of you who don't know, this is Swami Paranthapa's book, My Guru and I. You launched this very recently.
Yeah, it was launched this year in April.
Just tell me a little bit about, like, why did you do this? How did this come about?
Okay, so we were traveling in India about 3 years ago, and we were in Maharashtra. It was just Guruji, Shubhra and I in the car. And he was relic hunting. And we were about to meet a saint that he wanted to collect a relic from.
For our Indian Saint Museum.
Yeah, for the Indian Saint Museum, yeah. And so we stopped at... So the moment was incredible because usually Guruji sits in the front and we sit in the back of the car. But for the whole of this journey, he sat in the back with me. And Shubhra was sitting in the front. And so there was such an sensation of... I felt so much love for him in this moments, and it sort of reached this feeling reached a crescendo, and then he stopped the car. He asked to get pakoras at a pakora stand because it's like, and I felt sort of like exposed and vulnerable in this. I don't know how to describe. And then, so he got rid of Shubhra basically. She had to leave the car. And the driver went with her.
To get the pakoras.
And then he looks at me and I look at him. And then he says to me, everything that you have felt, everything that you've experienced, write it down and call it My Guru and I. And I was like, how can I say anything else? And so then... and then he told me the process, how to do it, and then he basically waited, and so it took about 1.5 years, and I remember we were at this place of another guru in South Africa, and his disciples had just finished writing books, so they were presenting these books to Guruji, and he took the chance. He was like, "And we're still waiting for you. We're still waiting for you, for yours." And so then just the whole experience of it, of doing it, and of seeing his provision, of seeing like how he has given everything, and that the bottom line is that the story is not my story. It's about him. It's about how he took a small boy from a small town and give an experience that will give a window into the heart of the Guru. A 1-year window, because there's no way to fully see.
But it's a nice visualization of it.
A window, only a window. And even that, not to him, to his feet. Just to his feet. So like this, it was born, and then so the process of it coming and the incredible people that played a part of it, and in it. So I've known the publisher of the person who published the book for about 20 years. So about the same time, just after meeting Guruji, I met her. She was a client of mine, and then And she kept saying, "Why don't you write a book? Why don't you?" And I was like, "A book for, a book for what? There's no need. There's so many books." And so it's been really well received, and it's really, I think it's really beautiful and important to see that the only thing we have in the end and the only thing we have in the beginning is the Guru. And that he is the one taking us from the multi-level ignorances that we possess, that are in our possession, to the degrees of understanding and that are also available in us. And that he doesn't stop. He doesn't stop. And it is continuous. And we can see it. I mean, I can see in you so much the metamorphic power of his love. I can see. And I can see it in all my God brothers. And I can see it in the lives of so many devotees. And like when I think about it, like what Krishna did for Arjuna, he spoke him to realization. He literally just spoke him to that place. And what Guruji is doing for us is the same. He speaks us. He holds our hand. He is so enmeshed in our lives and taking us to where it is that we need to. And it's experiential. It's not, I'm not comparatively reading a book and then saying, can he do the... I'm living the experience of what he's doing to change everything continuously here and here. He is granting the experience. And this is from the radiation of his presence. His presence in my life physically and his presence in my life internally. And so I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for him, for what he represents, and not for the performance, not for the show, but that he's himself and that there's nobody like that.
Well, he's granted you what you wanted as a child, to feel the presence of God. Well, not to in a sense, take this conversation into a mundane realm, but people are going to obviously want to read this, given what you've said. And where can they find a copy of this book?
So it's available on most online platforms. So I think the easiest one is Amazon, and that it's also available on a website called the African Book Collective. So you can find it there. I don't know if it's available electronically yet. I'm not sure like what the process is or what the publishing company is going to do about that. Mm-hmm. But I think this is what we're working towards.
Right. Okay. Awesome. So if people want to read it, please go ahead. I always get upset when I see these books because it reminds me that I'm lagging. Guruji has
your story is way more.
But I also feel like give me some time. I'm too young to write a book about my life. Let me get a bit older, then I can write a book about my life.
We are already pushing 50. So.
I'm not there yet. No, but Guruji has asked me to write a few things, and I always just say to him, I will. Like, I never say no, but I'm also like, but you've also asked me to do other things.
Other things, yeah.
I'm doing this, and I'm, anyway. But it's always a little, every time, when I found out that, I didn't know you were writing this, right? And so then I saw some pictures about the impending launch, and then the launch, and I was just like, I was like, one more to add to the list. Because, Myron, another, good colleague of mine, he's on his third book. Yeah. And Kanchalochana wrote a book, and I'm just thinking, I need to get going, because if too many publish one, my excuses start to get weaker. No, but it's very nice that you've done this. I hope to find the time to read it as well.
It's really easy read. It's got big font and it's an easy read. So.
Big font, easy read, in case anybody was discouraged. Okay, let's just jump topic now for something very different. I think we've gone to the feels and the heart, and we all as Swamis, fast forwarding, we're here to serve. We're serving the people, serving Guruji, doing everything in our capacity, I guess. A lot of your seva is focused in Africa. Yeah. Obviously, you're from South Africa. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are just very ignorant about what the African Hindu, Vaishnava, religious, spiritual landscape actually looks like.
Yeah.
And so I wanted just to dive into that a little bit, to understand what it's been like, what have you encountered, and maybe some of the particularities that you see there that are not so common elsewhere.
Yeah. So Africa is really interesting because there is an incredible amount of potential. And for all intents and purposes, there's like what I've experienced in Ghana, for example. So there was quite a famous Swami called Swami Ganananda, who belongs to the Saraswati tradition, and his initiating guru is a disciple of Swami Shivananda. So what he did in Ghana is really incredible. So now you can say there are 2 generations going into 3 of black people that are born Hindu because of the incredible work that Swami Ganananda did. So I had the privilege of meeting his successor, the now late Swami Satyananda, and to see a Hinduism that doesn't have anything to do with Indians, and to see a structure, like a functional structure of Hinduism that inspires, that people live the principles of Hinduism. They live vegetarianism, they live deity worship, they live the understanding. So it's really interesting that you can have an Abrahamic Hinduism where all that you do is you replace the Abrahamic view of God with Eastern view. So all the same relationship ascribals happen but it was interesting to see in Ghana that this is not the case. That even though Christianity is a really alive in Ghana, and there's a very specific way that God is viewed, that the way and because many of these people will never be able to travel to India just because of the affordability.
Right.
And that despite this, and it's also where I saw a really interesting dynamic. So there is the guru, and then there are the initiates of the guru. So people who have taken the sadhana and have taken the vow of commitment from him. And so they represent his teachings, and they compose his the board that runs his organization. So they are the where we would be as swamis.
Yeah.
And there's no difference. There are women and men equally in this place, and they have a clear vision of what it is that they would like to see in the world. And so I met several business people from India in Ghana whose lives changed when they came to Ghana. Like they had no relationship with God in India. They came here and saw this and they were like, we need to relook.
Wow.
We need to relook at ourselves. So I've spoke to I think in the first time I was there, 9 people. And I mean, the stories are more and more, but I had the chance to speak to those people. And what happened subsequently is that, of course, families then started moving to Ghana from India, and the value of community worship and importance of Sanatana Dharma struck home to them. So where I met most of these people was at a Vishnu Sahasranama recital that happened as a result of seeing black people doing it. So this was a really incredible thing for me to see. And they have in Ghana 9 really huge centers,
Wow.
huge temples, active brahmacharis are much less, but the community is really, really alive. And just recently, one of the students that were attending and learning from this the center in Accra had the chance to study at Swami, what is his name? the center in India. He had the chance to study. So he finished the 4-year course, apt at chanting mantra, memorized several portions of Bhagavad Gita, memorized several portions of Upanishad, memorized Kena Upanishad. So to see this like a spiritual diaspora, I think, expanding in Accra, and from young people keeping, carrying, spreading, acknowledging this incredibly rich tradition. It's amazing, really amazing to see. And then in Kenya, the same. So everybody's looking, and in Kenya, the search is more Vaishnava, so more Gaudiya Vaishnava. And the individuals that I've met and have spoken to and have had the opportunity to bring, for example, to a darshan to Guruji, and the group that's formed of Black Kenyan devotees is also really interesting. And I think the things that are faced are totally different, and the feeling, the way that they relate to Sanatana Dharma, to Bhakti Marga, to Guruji, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's so much more available for me. It has been so much more available, so much easier to enter into a room and to speak to people about him, and then to have a follow-up, to have more than one follow-up. From this meeting of Kenyan people, there were like 20 of them. 10 of them are now devotees. And 10 of them are now devotees serving a deity. 10 of them are now devotees influencing their families. 10 of them are now devotees who have the idea of what it is to be in a relationship with the living master. So the beauty of it is experiential. And then in South Africa, it's different. So in South Africa, in Johannesburg, almost all the devotees, there's 40 devotees serving Jwalana Shringadev, and on a rotation. So he has not, in the 6 years, he has had unbroken service. And again, the dynamic is totally different in Jan. They are all Indian. They're all Indian, and they've for 80% of them were people that I had interactions with in one way or another, and then again into the presence of Guruji, and then literally they walk the road with him, and whatever the ups and downs are, and so the way that it's molded is pinned for me on the knowledge that he wants us to have. So if I look at what Gyanananda did, again, it was using the mirror of knowledge. So everybody can get this knowledge, and then everybody can have that access. So for him, it was clear there's an inner circle, and there's an outer circle, and there's a circle.
Ripple effect. Almost,
yeah. So you decide what you want to experience, where you want to stand, and this is the knowledge that you then have access to, and what it is that can and cannot happen. And how I can see the difference is that now Gyanananda is gone, Satchidananda is gone, there's no successor, right? So the organization is in the hands of those disciples, the initiated disciples. And what is keeping everything going is the knowledge that was laid down to begin with. And so from this, so many trees can grow. So many things can happen. So if there's no knowledge, there can be no experience. And I see this in Kenya as well. So everybody has a story, and the story always is to do with the things that are difficult for us. And so I watch them, and I see that you have to go through this by yourself. We can hold the space and encourage the service and whatever it is that is doable inside of possibility. But each person, this is not free, it's not easy. It means giving up so many things. And when I see it for myself, to give up, like most things, I'd already given up before meeting Guruji.
Yeah.
So already vegetarian, never drank, never smoked. So this wasn't an issue for me. But for so many people, I mean, if you look at the demographic in Africa, it's really, really difficult for them to make transitions that will allow them to receive. So it's incredible for me when I can see the commitment, when I can see that this flies against everything for them culturally.
I was going to ask that because
it flies against everything.
Vaishnava culture, I know it can spread anywhere. It's possible.
Yeah.
However, there's different degrees of compatibility and integration. And so when you take, say, Arab culture, European culture, Latin American culture, American culture, etc., there are different challenges that are clearly there. So in African culture, what are you seeing as the biggest challenges?
The biggest challenge is that most people in the continent of Africa, the hugest problem is that they barely have something to put in their mouth. And so to say to them, or to speak of acceptance, or to speak of loving God, or to speak of is an unnecessary thing to mention.
It's a luxury to think.
It's a luxury to think about this. So the approach needs to be completely different. The approach needs to be such that, because I know what it feels like, what poverty feels like, having grown up the way that I did. And I also know that it is possible to use whatever our feelings are, whatever our experience are, to have a totally different experience. But you can't put it in a soap and sell it to somebody and say, if you bath with this, everything will change. Mm-hmm. So like the way that those people experience their life and what's happening to them and where they are is for all intents and purposes really difficult until the moment, and what I've seen is until the moment that the Guruji's physical presence is there, the whole perspective change. Because then it can become possible that it doesn't matter what's happening. And the story of a devotee in Kenya, a female devotee in Kenya, again, against the wall. She's against the wall. There's nothing going in, nothing coming out. The husband has left the picture. For a lot of these women, when they start this journey, the first thing that happens is their partners leave them. Like they just not in the picture anymore.
Why do you think that is?
Because it's difficult. It's difficult because it's so foreign to them. And an African man is an African man. And for him, he's the one providing for this person. And this is the way that it's supposed to be set up. And this is how it's supposed to feel. And this is what we're supposed to be doing together. And then suddenly everything changes. Her perspective in life changes, the way that she does things, the things she brings into their home, everything changes.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, done.
Do you think sometimes it comes to me across like it's as simple as there's another man in the relationship now?
Essentially. It's not, and they're not the most important.
Right. And so they're not able to really contextualize that as being a non-competition. It's something different.
And I don't think this is only Africans. I think it's
No. That's why I wouldn't characterize it as only
everybody.
African. Yeah. I think in general, when you bring a guru into a relationship when there's one is a devotee, another one is not. It's very, very difficult because of these dynamics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then I've seen their lives and I've been there with them. And so I remember Guruji was just there and she had a huge need and nothing was happening. She's a filmmaker. And it's a really difficult game anyway. And then to land deals and to be able to do productions is difficult. And so she didn't know how she's going to pay her children's school fees. She didn't know how she's going to buy food. She didn't know how she's going to... And then we in the kitchen and Guruji had just left. And the next day, all of them came to the center. And she comes to me and she's got tears in her eyes. And she takes a huge wad of money out of her pocket. And he says, look what he did. Look what he did. So then I asked, what are you talking about? She's a random person she hasn't seen in 8 years comes up to her and hands her this money. And again, it was exactly the amount that she needed to cover all the things that needed to be covered. And for her, this answered the doubt in her mind, because she had a lot of doubt. Like, why should I? And this is not what is culturally appropriate for me. And shortly after this, of course, within the time frame, she became a devotee. And then because I think the whole of humanity wants to have some kind of relationship with something that they don't compute as normal, or that they can connect to, or that they can. And to watch this group of women develop a relationship with the deity and render service to him. So going from the place of absolute ignorance about it, and then learning the puja, and then after learning the puja, at their own time, engaging, and this becoming something that's really important to them, and that they feel something is missing when they're not doing. And so to see how the relationship develops, and then to hear how differently they reference him from the beginning to now. Like before it was different, and now he's a part of their lives.
Right.
And it's really amazing to see, and to see the journey and the things that they struggle with, and how that then translates into the victories that they experience from him holding them in the entire process.
It sounds to me, it's a very universal principle that when we're going through changes, that if you're left to your own devices, it can be incredibly difficult, if not suffocating. And it's like you need someone to handhold you.
Yeah.
And so it's like when we're talking about Africans adopting Hinduism, if they're just wrestling with Hinduism by themselves, I think it's not going to work. But the guru figure, be it in the case of the disciple of Swami Shivananda, or in the case of Guruji, that the guru acts as the bridge to help these people navigate, in a sense, through these different challenges to arrive at that place. And it leaves me with a curiosity, because you mentioned in the case of the Ghanaians that it's non-Indians, Africans who are fully...
It's full black Sanatana Dharma. Full.
Is the experience like markedly an African Sanatana Dharma, or do you feel like it's an Indian Sanatana Dharma? Like, is it, you understand what I mean by that? Like, is there vestiges of the culture there, or how is it?
I think it's incredible how Swami Ganananda understood. And then, so his backstory is that he was working as a herbalist. And then from there, he met his guru. So the guru was traveling through Ghana. Mm-hmm. And then he received, of course, all the instruction in India itself. So he traveled to do that. And he was completely transformed. So he returned to Ghana. And then he started. So in the guru's instruction, he did so whatever he had imbibed became then what he imparted. So when I can recognize the procedure of puja is recognizable, like how they are performing yagna, but the flavor is uniquely Ghanaian.
It's nice.
And the way that they do music is completely different. The same lyrics, totally different connect.
Is the clothing also somehow affected?
Yeah, saris, they do the full thing. They wear the full thing.
But there's some Ghanaian clothing mixed in?
They make... Because, Ghana is a beautiful country and it's an incredible culture.
Right.
And it has a really rich textile history, right? And
right.
They bring everything there.
It's nice, man.
They bring everything there.
This is something I wrestle with sometimes, just because we are Hindus in the West. I'm sitting here in the middle of Germany, and I feel like sometimes people have an idea that Vaishnavism or Hinduism, Indian culture, should be a replacement of the existing one. Integrative.
No,
it should be more integrative.
They integrate.
We can take bits of this, bits of that, and create a more integrated... It's nice.
It's amazing to see, because they are Ghanaians, there's no doubt. They're not trans-Indian.
Right.
They're not trying to be something.
Exactly.
And for many of them, they are born into this. So it's like, okay, my understanding, this is Shiva, this is Vishnu, this is...
They're not converts.
They're not converts. Yeah. They're born in it.
Yeah.
And so this is what... And their place of belonging is like other people go to church, they go to They go to temple, and it's part of their life. And then there's a devotee, her name is Hemangi Dasi. Guruji initiated her in South Africa. And so she does the Devi Puja. It's her job every day. So she does nothing else. Her children work. And so she's committed herself to doing Devi Puja in their temple every day. And so this is her thing. If I call in the morning, there's no way I'm reaching her, because that's where she is. And this is what her commitment is. And so, and then to see the shine in their eyes when they speak about their guru, and the fact that he was there, and that he was with them on the ground, and they built this thing together. And that he was a family man, he renounced his family, and they became his everything. And so he gave to them, and they did this thing together. It's amazing. It's so amazing to see.
That's really nice.
Yeah, it's really amazing to see. If you ever have the chance, you should. And Guruji wants to go to Ghana, and the feeling is that it may happen in the next 2 years. Just to see that, to see like what he did, that he literally took mental pictures where he was, and he produced these images, and like really iconic images in Ghana that are now part of the landscape, and that he made Hinduism a part of the day-to-day life of people. This is legendary. It's like he made a legacy. And I don't think that he intended for it to be as big as it became, but he just worked. He worked, and people were willing. And the same is in Kenya. People were willing. And because it's willing, and then I can see then the comparison. And I can see how people walking with Guruji versus people who are walking with Ganananda, and how that process has integrally affected them. They've been affected by it. And in such a way that their lives have improved. And then to see that some of the dynamics, like some conversations that I've had with people, have been such that they understand what it is that needs to happen. And they ask the questions. In Ghana, somebody asked me the pointed question about, can he do puja to Shiva if A, B, C, and D? So, to understand how not to create the offenses. And so wanting to increase the knowledge that he had, because he didn't have access as a disciple. And so then to guide him and say, I don't know the inner workings of your organization, but it may be really important for you to speak to one of the people that are. And if that's where it is you want to grow, then this is how you do it. And so it's really interesting. It's very interesting for me that whatever becomes valuable to people is where they'll put their energy and where transformation will happen. And that it's the work that shows what has been put into us. The results that are coming for all of us now is only the work that he's put into us, and like what he's invested in. And the fact that we're still here,
We've survived. Yeah. Not only survived, thriving.
Yeah.
So lots to look forward to in Africa. I think it
Yeah,
feels like
it's
there's
really
a rich sort of landscape for this to take
It's
root.
really, really cool. And I see it's going to be challenging. There's no doubt that it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that it's going to be, I have no illusion that it's going to be difficult. I expect it to be. And I also understand that he doesn't look things from the bottom up. He looks at things from the top down. And so wherever the instruction is, or however it is, that his word is what is vital, and what makes things happen or not happen.
Yeah, I think like you pointed out, there are systemic issues in Africa that are very hard to overcome.
Yeah.
But I think that the soil is fertile for this type of thing.
For it.
Beautiful.
Like we just recently attended the International Yoga Festival in Johannesburg. It was huge. And I was like, oh my God, there are so many Black people. And there were a lot of them. Like, I think at least 25% of the entire audience was Black. And so watching them and watching this engagement in yoga, and then many of them coming to the stalls, and and so many young people wanting to have a different perspective, a different experience than the one that they've been given. And so this is really interesting. And then a lot of people, so what's been happening is that a lot of people, the way that this podcast, for example, has been really useful for me is sharing it in different forums and then getting people's feedback from it. And the fact that it becomes a bridge to Guruji. It becomes a bridge to somebody having a direct experience in an online darshan, so it works like this. And then also like several of the satsangs that you've given, that Mayurina has given, that Aditya has given, that whoever, becomes a bridge to somebody having an experience or to somebody thinking about something in a completely different, because not everybody has access to Guruji, can travel here.
Sure, of course.
Especially from Africa, it's hard. And then even when he's there, it's difficult for people to reach to where he is. But like this kind of thing becomes an incredible way to influence people's ability to choose something different. And then, of course, to experience something different. So thank you.
Most welcome. Yeah, I think I was trying to ask this final question because it's an observation I've had for a while and I want to get your perspective on it. Even in Europe and to an extent even in North America, it's noticeable how few Black people come to the movement.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's because culturally they've been dealing with so much historically, as we know, instances of slavery and segregation and different things, that when they do take root in Europe, in North America, in these places, they hang on quite strong to their culture and to their identity. And I think there's more challenges and obstacles to overcome to feel so integrated and comfortable to then explore something different and new.
Yes. Yeah.
And I wonder how much you share that observation and how much maybe it's just a question of time before that gets resolved, because it feels like it's still vestiges of a previous reality, rather than something maybe necessarily
so I think the material is the main thing, right? The material success is really important for people, and if you've been so disadvantaged and for such a long period of time. Like in South Africa, we have 300 years of repression, suppression, and slavery, and so many things so many unmentionables, right? And so now what's happening is that they call it the reawakening of the roots. So people are really seeking their cultural identity and seeing like how to decolonize that. What does it look like without the Western influence? What does our religion look like without that? What does our clothing look like? What was our food? What are the things? And so there's a huge movement in I can speak about in South Africa of people trying to find their cultural identity. So, and then to trade or to move into something that's completely different doesn't make sense, right? Doesn't make sense, because it feels like you've just come out of this huge disadvantage. And this is so completely different and so foreign. And so, and for all intents and purposes, maybe even dangerous, because it means having to give up so many things. Like for people in the town that I was born and that are my age group, and it's the furthest thing. It's the furthest thing from their minds to give up anything. To give up anything. And I think even to speak of something like what we are all looking for is peace, right? And that the link may be that the behaviors or the association that they keep are key to the things that they feel. It's so difficult to insert this idea because already, we are just trying to survive, and the things that we do to entertain ourselves, the things that we do to feel what we want, like you said earlier, are key and are important to people. So I think it will be some time, it'll be a lot of time before people are comfortable enough to explore something different, because who they were was not fully explored. Who they were was not considered valuable or important or beautiful.
Yeah.
So, and I think this is warranted. It's warranted that people invest in looking at their own cultural identity and seeing how to make peace with who it is that they are in that. And then we see...
It's very understandable. Very understandable. I feel like you see in the Vaishnava world that the polar opposite of the African diaspora is like Russia, China, communities that were under communism and in a sense very tightly held in their culture. So when they've exploded out from this,
they just look for...
They want to explore those other things. So, there's so many Russians coming to Hinduism, to Vaishnavism. In China, big interest.
It's huge interest in China,
You're going for a month soon?
Yeah.
So, but I feel like sometimes it's on the opposite side of the scale, and it's really this cultural sort of element. I think time, therefore, needs to be taken into consideration. It's it's fully understandable, these challenges and these processes, and it's somehow cyclical.
And also the words come Swami, the words come realization, the words come enlightenment when they become part of the consciousness, and when more and more people are speaking about it, right, and that interest develops, and so then people can decide what it is and where it is they want to take and what it is they want to engage in. So,
Makes a lot of sense.
We see.
Thank you so much, Swami Paranthapa.
Thank you so Thank you so much.
This is a really beautiful conversation. I appreciate it so much.
I appreciate you so much, and thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you to everybody who will watch this and share it.
Yes, so please, again, here.
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.